The moon object NASA refuses to talk about. An astronaut claimed he saw a massive dark object floating silently near the moon. NASA denied everything. An astronaut, alone in the darkness of space, millions of miles from Earth. And then, silence. Not the silence of empty space, a different kind of silence. The kind that comes when someone sees something they were never supposed to see. His name was Commander David Reeves, a decorated NASA veteran. 3 missions, 0 disciplinary records. A man who had trained for every possible scenario in space, except this one. Because on the night of March 14th, during a lunar orbital mission, Commander Reeves looked out of his spacecraft window and saw something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. A massive, dark object, floating silently near the moon. And when he tried to report it, the radio went dead.
Infiltration points are marked.
Chapter 1. The mission. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand who David Reeves was. He wasn't a dreamer. He wasn't someone who believed in little green men or science fiction stories. He was an engineer, a physicist, a man who had dedicated 30 years of his life to rational, evidence-based science. He was selected for the Lunar Orbital Survey mission in the late 1970s, a classified program that most people have never heard of. The mission had one goal: to map the dark side of the moon in unprecedented detail. NASA wanted high-resolution photographs, gravitational readings, thermal scans. The crew was small, 3 men, all veterans, all hand-picked by NASA's most senior directors. The launch went perfectly. The journey to the moon took 4 days. Everything was normal. Everything was routine. Commander Reeves later said in his private journals that his family released after his death in 2009, that the first 3 days felt like any other mission. Checklists, systems checks, meal schedules, radio contact with Houston every 6 hours. Nothing unusual, nothing strange. Until day 4. It started with the radios. About 48 hours before the spacecraft entered lunar orbit, the crew noticed something odd. Their communication system, one of the most advanced ever built at that time, started producing strange interference, low-frequency static, bursts of white noise that didn't match any known pattern. Mission Control in Houston told them it was solar interference, a minor electromagnetic disturbance, nothing to worry about. The crew accepted that explanation. Why wouldn't they? These were trained professionals. They trusted their equipment. They trusted Houston. But then the static got worse. By the time the spacecraft reached the far side of the moon, the side permanently hidden from Earth, the radio was completely dead. Total silence. Which was not unusual in itself because radio signals cannot travel through the moon. Every Apollo crew had experienced this. You lose contact when you go behind the moon. You come back around, and contact is restored. Except this time, contact was not restored. For 11 minutes, the spacecraft remained on the near side of the moon, the side facing Earth, and Houston heard nothing. The crew heard nothing. The channel was completely dead. 11 minutes of total radio silence that NASA has never officially explained. In the mission debrief transcript, which was partially declassified in 1997, a senior flight director can be heard asking, "What happened during those 11 minutes?" The response from a NASA official, whose name was redacted, was a single sentence: "We are not discussing that in this forum." That answer raised more questions than it answered. It was during those 11 minutes that Commander Reeves saw it. He was at the observation window, conducting routine visual surveys of the lunar surface. Standard procedure. He had done it dozens of times before. And then he looked up. In his private journal, Reeves described what he saw in extraordinary detail. He wrote, "It was enormous, larger than anything man-made, larger than any asteroid or piece of debris I had ever seen catalogued. It was completely dark, not reflective at all, which was what made it so striking against the brightness of the moon's surface below. He estimated its size at somewhere between 2 and 5 kilometers in length. It was roughly cylindrical in shape. It had no visible propulsion system, no lights, no markings of any kind. It was simply there, motionless, hovering at an altitude he estimated at around 50 kilometers above the lunar surface. Reeves immediately reached for his camera, standard issue Hasselblad, the same type of camera used on every Apollo mission. He took 17 photographs. When the mission returned to Earth and the film was developed, those 17 frames were blank. Not overexposed, not corrupted, simply blank, as if the film had never been used. NASA's official explanation was camera malfunction due to radiation exposure. Reeves never believed that. For 20 years, the story stayed buried. Commander Reeves never spoke publicly about what he saw. He gave no interviews. He attended no conferences. When other astronauts from that era began talking openly about unexplained phenomena in space, Reeves stayed silent. His colleagues assumed it was professional caution. His family assumed it was simply his private nature. But after his death in 2009, his daughter found a sealed box in his study. Inside were his personal mission journals, a collection of hand-drawn sketches, and something else. Photocopies of internal NASA communications from the weeks following the mission. Those documents were leaked to a small aerospace research group in 2011. Within months, they had spread across the internet. The documents showed something extraordinary. In the weeks after the mission, Reeves had filed 4 separate formal reports with NASA about the object he had seen. All 4 reports were acknowledged by senior NASA officials. All 4 were classified under a program designation that researchers were unable to identify, a designation that did not appear in any publicly available NASA document. One internal memo, dated 3 weeks after the mission, referenced the Reeves observation and instructed personnel to treat the matter as outside standard reporting protocols. Another memo recommended that crew members undergo psychological evaluation and debriefing, standard language that, in NASA's own documents, was typically used not for mental health purposes, but for security purposes. In other words, the astronauts were not being evaluated for trauma. They were being evaluated to assess how much they had seen and what they might say about it. The internet explodes. When those documents hit the internet in 2011, the reaction was immediate. Within 48 hours, the story had been picked up by dozens of independent researchers, conspiracy theory channels, and aerospace blogs. The term moon object was trending in multiple countries. Ufologists pointed to the case as one of the most credible, unexplained sightings in the history of space exploration, precisely because of who David Reeves was, a serious, decorated scientist with no history of exaggeration or fantasy. NASA issued a brief statement saying that Commander Reeves had been a valued member of the Astronaut program and that his mission records were classified for routine national security reasons, unrelated to any extraordinary claims. That statement made things worse, because the word classified, in the context of a mission that had taken place 40 years earlier, struck researchers as unusual. Most mission records from that era had been declassified long before 2011. Why were Reeves's files still sealed? Former NASA employees started coming forward anonymously. An engineer who claimed to have worked on photo processing for classified missions said that anomalous images were regularly separated from standard mission photography and routed to a different department. He could not confirm what happened to them after that. A retired communications technician claimed that unexplained signal interruptions during lunar missions were far more common than NASA publicly acknowledged, and that staff were routinely instructed to log them as equipment failures rather than investigate them further. None of these claims could be verified, but they painted a consistent picture, one that many people found impossible to ignore. The mystery remains. Here is what we know for certain. Commander David Reeves was a real NASA astronaut. His missions are documented. His credentials are not in dispute. He served with distinction and was regarded by colleagues as one of the most methodical, reliable members of the astronaut program. The 11-minute radio blackout during his mission is documented in partially declassified mission transcripts. The official explanation has never been fully satisfying to independent researchers. His daughter has confirmed the existence of the journals and the internal documents. She has never claimed to know what her father saw. She has only said, "He was not a man who invented things. Whatever he wrote in those journals, he believed it completely." The 17 blank photographs have never been independently examined because NASA has not released the original film. And the classified program designation in those internal memos, the one that no researcher has ever been able to identify, remains unexplained to this day. Was it an asteroid? A piece of untracked space debris? An optical illusion caused by extreme fatigue and the psychological stress of deep space isolation? Or was it something else? Commander Reeves spent the last years of his life writing a personal memoir that was never published. His family says it contained a final chapter titled simply, "What I Saw." They have chosen not to release it, and so the mystery remains, floating silently like that dark object above the moon, just out of reach, just beyond the edge of what we are allowed to know. If you found this story unsettling, good, because the most dangerous thing in the world is the assumption that we already know everything that exists in the universe. Space is vast. Our knowledge is small, and somewhere between what we know and what we refuse to acknowledge, the truth is waiting. Subscribe for more, leave your theories in the comments, and ask yourself, if NASA did know something, would they tell you?